When you look at progressives, those state theorists that come into American politics after the Civil War, the progressive theorists, what they are absolutely against is the social compact or the Constitution, because it's a defense of individual rights.
You've written a lot about this ugly modern phenomenon called by the ugly name of the administrative state. Where does that term come from, and what does it mean?
The term, the administrative state, as just the use of administrative state, I don't know the exact who coined that phrase. I know
Probably an administrator.
Yeah, perhaps. I know it comes into the literature of political science fairly late, because when I first started writing on this phenomenon, I called the study of what I was focusing on, the problem of the modern state, I called it administrative centralization, which is what Tocqueville called the problem of despotism in modern time. But by the...
So that's a term from the early 19th century.
Right,
Tocqueville's
term. Once the concept of the state died out, probably in the early part of the 20th century, the first writers in political science talked about the state incessantly. But the progressive movement, of course, once it succeeded in establishing itself in terms of liberalism, it didn't have to speak about the state really anymore. And even the political scientists didn't talk about the state.
Is the term a synonym for bureaucracy, or is it something different or larger than bureaucracy?
Well, the term is administrative state is now, I think, synonymous with bureaucracy, but the state itself is much more comprehensive. In fact, if you look at in its origins, the theoreticians who talked about the state talked about it as a rational state, which means that it's the rule of organized intelligence or knowledge. It means you have to develop, or you have to cultivate, the kind of knowledge that enables government to be able to solve our problems. So in principle, you could say that the modern state denies that any government, that there should be any limitation on the power of government, because the purpose of government is to solve our social, economic, political, any kind of human problem. But to solve those problems, you need human knowledge about those problems that is developed by the disciplines of the social sciences.
So when we call that the state, or maybe now we call it the administrative state,
yeah,
we're using state in, you might say, the German sense,
right,
der Staat, which is essentially unlimited government.
Right.
And just briefly contrast that to the traditional American understanding of government, or this.
Yeah.
State is not a term that we would use as zealously as the Germans and modern Americans now use the state. But what's the contrast?
Well, the contrast, of course, is in understanding the social compact or the Constitution. That was understood in a completely different way than the modern state, because it creates a distinction, constitutionalism, between government and civil society, between church and state, which requires a limitation on the power of government and a defense of the autonomy of civil society. In other words, a great part of human life will take place through contractual relations, not through compulsion or through the force of government.
In the private sphere, or in civil society, not under the thumb or the organized intelligence of the state. Yeah.
And of course, it presupposes that the compact, when you look at the social compact as the Constitution in a way is a compact, it's a defense of the individual or the natural rights of human beings. And the purpose then of government is to protect those rights. And the exercise of those rights take place in civil society, and government ensures that those who participate are understood in terms of the principle of equality of citizenship. So you have equality and liberty as part of that compact, when you look at progressives, those state theorists that come into American politics after the Civil War, the progressive theorists, what they are absolutely against is the social compact or the Constitution, because it's a defense of individual rights. And the state establishes a new ground of rights, and that's in terms of establishing rights as citizens that are granted by government. They're not a compact of people who have rights that precede government.
That's right. So from the progressive point of view, there are no rights outside the state or against the state. You get your rights by means of membership, as it were,
within the state.
In the state,
right. That's right.
Whereas under the old understanding, the whole purpose of government is to protect your rights, which you have as a natural human being or as a God, someone made in the image of God.
And so the fundamental defense of the rights are established by the protection of property. Property both in person, but also in conscience, in speech, in the right to your own labor. The most comprehensive understanding of property, of course, is the right to all of the attributes that the individual has as a human being are used on their own behalf, and they're protected in the form of property. There's no kind of protection of property that, apart from an understanding of a public good, of a common good or a public good defined by the state. Now, I wouldn't define this as a common good in the way James Madison would, but let us say there's no absolute protection for property in the state. The state, in the idea of the state, you have to get beyond private property protection.
Another way, let's look at this another way. We know from Plato and Aristotle that every political society points to a certain human type. It sort of culminates in a certain human type. Monarchy and in the good monarch, and aristocracy and the character of an aristocrat. What's the human type that dominates the administrative state? What is the human type that the administrative state culminates in?
Yeah, I would say from the point of view of those theorists who look to what it was that the state should protect, the human being that is protected is, let's say, a creature that is not known by nature. No, they're known by the possibilities of human creativity. And so rights are not understood in terms of the defense of nature, but rights are understood in terms of freedom of expression, of what it is. You let be authentic, be yourself.
SelfCreation.
SelfCreation.
As one of President Obama's favorite terms, actually.
Yeah. And in fact, what the modern theory behind the administrative state presupposes is that we don't know what it means to be human. And that means that the problem of that human beings create themselves in time, which means that we don't know. The problem of identity becomes fundamental problem of modern historical man. Because if we don't know what it means to be human, we're constantly establishing ourselves. We're recreating ourselves. We're conscious of the freedom that we have to recreate ourselves.
In a way, that sounds quite radical. In another way, it doesn't. And so we need to, I think, let's try to make a distinction. Americans are used to the idea of, recreating themselves in the sense of changing careers. Or moving, changing locations, and ceasing to be a Californian and becoming a Texan. How is that familiar freedom to redefine our life to a certain extent? How does that contrast to the self-creation that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, when human beings recreate the conditions of their lives, that's different than creating what is fundamental. In other words, when you say to change your job is not the same as, say, changing your gender. I mean, that requires technology and require. I mean, one can say then that one thinks that there are no natural limits, that human beings, through science, technology, through creativity, can establish what it means to be human for them. See, the American founders would have understood that it was not a problem to identify what a human being is, because a human being was understood by their nature, through faculties of nature, like human reason.
Yes, and the senses and so forth.
And senses that made that intelligible. But you're in a brave new world when you open up the possibilities of recreating your society, recreating the self, recreating all of those environmental forces that are possible of recreation, like transforming economy, transforming society, establishing grounds of identity in tangible historical categories like race or class. All of those become new possibilities and are developed and come to be institutionalized in ways that make it very difficult to understand what we have in common as individual human beings.
No, that's well put. But how do we get from that exciting self-creation, that sort of Nietzschean self-invention, to bureaucracy? The boring, gray rule of bureaucrats.
Let's put it this way. In order for you to be free, you quote this frequently, as Roosevelt said, necessitous men cannot be free.
Right.
First of all, you have to give people everything they need before they'll even begin to be able to think about the possibilities of transforming yourself so radically that, but in the absence of that, what it really means is you have to get beyond necessity, both material, but also natural necessity. And when you do that,
and how do you do that?
Well, material necessity, you need a bureaucracy, you need a welfare state, you need an anti-state.
So everyone's necessities have to be taken care of, even if they don't themselves want to take care of them, or exert the effort to take care of them. Someone will take care of them.
And then you're free to. I saw a congresswoman from, I think it was Michigan, and there was a debate about cutting entitlements for certain people, and she was saying, she was very indignant about saying that you can't cut entitlements to people who say don't want to get up in the morning and go to work. There are some people that don't like to get up and go to work. We should be able. They should have that choice.
Right. This is what, if you remember in John Rawls's A Theory of Justice, he speaks about the person who spends his day counting blades of grass. And he has the same right, and the same needs, and therefore his provisions must be provided for him by government if he's too busy counting blades of grass to go to work.
But I think in the Lockean or the American tradition, necessity is a great spur to achievement. So they were of the opinion that necessity was a good. Because they thought that necessity...
Or certainly could be a good.
Yeah, of course. And it certainly does, and you can see that the people who do are driven by what there's tremendous achievement that is spurred by necessity. When you get to the natural, getting beyond natural necessity, there I think you have to have developed a high level of science and engineering that makes certain things possible.
So getting beyond necessity means, first of all, as you were saying, getting beyond material necessity, and that's where the welfare state comes in, broadly speaking. And then, but there's something sexier than that, beyond that, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the intellectuals are always the ones who, in their time, try to establish what passes as the latest kind of consciousness that we have of what freedom can be. And so it always has to be in some ways more radical, because so insofar as the intellectuals are going to lead, and they have to be the most outrageous, and so
transgressive. as we say these days. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think once you establish consciousness of freedom as the ground of establishing how we know what it means to be human, it's open-ended, it's unlimited. And depending upon how you transform your society, how you recreate it in each epoch, you open up new possibilities each time. And of course, the problem of politics then is how do you prevent those reactionaries that are trying to keep us from moving forward? And so you have the real fundamental distinction in politics is between progressives and reactionaries.